no matter how methodical or logical we think we are, something spurs or triggers us to go in a direction, and then we start to think through it. So it's like we trip and we fall forward, and then we start thinking.
Marcel, so many people that run businesses are hesitant to engage their customers in a dialogue like you just mentioned. But I've never met an individual that runs a business that doesn't want to talk about what they want.
Who are you and what do you do?
My name's Chris Kramer. I lead a business called The Success Catalyst. I think the best way to define what I do is I help business owners make better decisions and lead their businesses more effectively.
And so then in your mind, when did you cross that threshold from being an amateur of helping business owners to being an expert?
I think it's ongoing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that means I started getting paid for it. It's an ongoing process. And as long as I'm working, I'll be changing.
For the business owners out there, how do we take control of our fate of our business?
I really think there's a couple of things. The first one is we have to realize we don't have all the answers, and our math may not add up. So I think the process of engaging peers is a big part of succeeding because it builds self-awareness. And self-awareness is foundational to any leader. No matter which way you're looking at the problem, you're thinking about optimizing talent or just making good marketing moves. Self-awareness about you, your company, your people, your customers is a big deal. So the first thing I would do is I would say, I'm going to get my math checked. The second thing is, I think, and this is often invested in, I'm really going to understand the psychology of my target market, and I'll invest however I can to understand it. Marcel, so many people that run businesses are hesitant to engage their customers in a dialogue like you just mentioned. But I've never met an individual that runs a business that doesn't want to talk about what they want.
The 3 F words that determine our fate in business. What are the 3 F words and what does this mean?
Yeah, that's pretty basic. I mean, I've been in business now for almost 40 years. My career's been divided into kind of 2 halves. The first half, I worked in Fortune 50 companies, came up through the sales and marketing area and ended up in the general management. And then I had some family challenges that created the need for me to get off the road. And I wanted to take control of my life and be able to spend time with my family and do things when I want to do it. And so I started a business and the learning process I went through at that stage of my life became one of the most important. There's three actions that really define what we do. We either freeze in uncertainty, we run or flight, or fight. Those 3 things really determine whether or not we ultimately succeed. And I think everybody that's in business is in business with the idea of succeeding. I don't know many people that get into it just to survive, or certainly with the idea that failure is what I'm aiming for and I want to brilliantly fail. But you have to confront those 3 things. I mean, and they're very natural forces. And I think today, when especially during COVID, during a time of great uncertainty, our reactions to that uncertainty are really well defined by freeze, flight, and fight.
As a business owner, when does this come up for people? Like under what circumstances are we faced with the 3 F words?
A big part of my practice is peer-to-peer teams, and they're participating in a process to help them understand where their belief system may be at odds with what they want to achieve. One of the most helpful things in my career is when my answers have been questioned. So the challenge of questioning what we think is true is extremely important. So anyway, during a time of uncertainty, those kinds of challenges are more common. I see a lot of business owners today that when they start to think about the pandemic and all of the challenges that they think it brings to them, some of them go into that freeze mode in a natural reaction, and they start to think of ways, well, how do I adjust what I'm doing to survive? They start throwing things overboard, including people. And they don't really think about how they can grow during a time of uncertainty. And there are some that grow because needs never go away. They just change. So the idea of making a better decision about how an opportunity can benefit one, I think, is a differentiating aspect of success. Helping business owners understand that there is opportunity, especially when there's uncertainty, as opposed to how to survive uncertainty.
So when we're in this mode of freezing, what are some steps for people to either be more aware of it or how to avoid it, or to just kind of put it into some context or perspective what they're actually doing?
I recommend your audience check out some of his books. One in particular, Homo Deus. He looks at how human beings became what we are, how we evolved to get to where we are in the ecosystem of this planet. And one of the points he makes is very fundamental, but I think it's really important that it gets to business. And that is, what separates the human being from the rest of nature is our ability to imagine things that aren't there, to imagine what could be, and to tell a story around what that is. And so when you plan, your ability to imagine what could be is about taking advantage of what we're talking about during a time of uncertainty. And if you've thought through that multiple times and you continually focus on what could be for my business, what could be given a condition, what if this happened, that process is extremely powerful to prepare somebody for a situation that's going to occur.
Things that we do on an everyday basis and don't even question it, but to have a level of awareness to go, okay, why do I do this? Or what am I feeling? Or what's this thing? Then we can start to kind of harness these abilities that are just part of our biology. Like another reference here to thinking fast and slow, that there's two brains, your emotional and your logical brain, but everything starts with emotion. No matter how methodical or logical we think we are, something spurs or triggers us to go in a direction, and then we start to think through it. So it's like there's, we trip and we fall forward, and then we start thinking. When there's uncertainty, that means there's a lot of things that people don't know what's going to happen, which is where opportunity lies. Because when everyone knows what's going to happen, it kind of starts to limit some of that opportunity. When we're thrown through a loop, that's where we really need to take a step back and really start looking at, okay, where does opportunity lie? Where are the demands, the needs that can be filled and that I can provide value for?
Absolutely, Marcel. I think when people start to look at that aspect, that the uncertainty is the opportunity, because of the psychology of the target market that people are pursuing is as impacted as they are. So there's kind of two psychologies. When everybody starts their business, including you and me, we start with the idea that we're going to win, and we're willing to take risk. One of the first pitfalls that happens is actually we start to become successful. And that success leads to, I have to protect what I've already got, as opposed to looking for ways to drive further into the needs of whatever target market we're surviving. So one of the kind of themes of my business has been playing to win, which means overlooking and keeping, a focus on the target of how we can really do a better job of providing value to our target market.
It's funny, the psychology behind it, that as you do better, you start to almost give up on the principles that got you there in the first place. So in this case, taking risk or trusting in your own actions, because now you have something to protect, and now you feel that there's something to lose. So instead of figuring out how do you keep applying these principles to move it forward, you change up your method, and then that potentially could result in either stagnation or issues with the business failing.
That protection mode is what keeps businesses in a stagnant area. So many small businesses think they've done a great job just to maintain some level of success, and they fall into, how do we continue to maintain? Oh, we have a pandemic. What are we going to do to come out of it without hurting our personal lives too much? Again, it's an opportunity, it's a time to invest if we can see it.
The concept of the curiosity gap. Essentially, animals are these creatures. We are driven by curiosity and to look for things. It's why we either excel or go after things that excite us, or even why we turn and look at car crashes or fall subject to clickbait, right? It's this gap in curiosity that actually drives us. And there's a study done in the early 90s about how we can use it to create healthy lifestyle choices by rephrasing things almost as a question. So instead of saying it as goals that we have to achieve, saying it as more as what if I did this today, or what if my behavior changed in this direction? And then that starts to exploit the curiosity gap that is in us in a positive way. And, what could be for this business? What if we did this? And you treat it more like these hypotheses and these tests to spark our curiosity to create that driving force to move us forward in a good direction.
Marcel, you're 100% right. We can't help ourselves. Human beings have to explain. I mean, we're doing it in the form of a version of religion or a government that we would make up and imagine could be. We have to explain why situations exist. It's a compulsion that we have, and it's actually one that if we harness it, will turn into our greatest asset. It's the ability to say, what could be, and how can I get that? That's how tools happen. And that's why it's not enough just to have imagination, but you have to have a process to validate your information from the empathetic view of the target audience you're trying to understand and help. And so those two things together kind of fit into a success formula. I know what you need or want. I can imagine a way to fulfill that. But if I don't have those two things, an empathetic understanding of what my target audience is thinking about, it's very unlikely that my math is going to add up to something that will get them to act. Everybody's a story in their own book. So you have to understand, it's not your story, it's a collective story. And the only way that you can be effective with other people is to have an appreciation for how they're reading the book, not how you interpret it, or not what you think they should be doing to interpret it. So I can go back in my own career and I can look at me in a situation where I end up making the same mistake again and then realizing later, oh, that was that lesson. But a good example, some of your audience might remember microchannel as a technology. But I started listening to customers, and this is an important lesson. When I traveled to places like Royal Bank of Canada, and in those days, US West, that were buying nothing but IBM because it was a safe bet for a CIO. If a computer fails and you bought IBM, it won't be your fault. It'll be somebody else's, but you did the right thing when you bought IBM. That psychology was really hurting NCR. We were brilliant. We decided that we were going to beat them to market with new technology. We were going to make a faster computer, and we invested heavily to do those things. And our sales really didn't go up at all. In fact, we stayed at the miserable 300 the second year. We had better technology and we had lower prices. We started to get some insights. We started to talk to them about the psychology of why you're buying. And we heard if it's IBM, you can't go wrong. But one thing that somebody said that was really important and led to something was the worst problem we have when using a computer is downtime, because that was part of the psychology that was driving the decision making. When we did that, the sales went from 300 in a year to 10,000 a month. Being stubborn, later on in my life, when I'm trying to get a sales group together for small business owners, deja vu, I make the same mistake and I'm not listening until the anvil hits me in the head.
Yeah, it's one of those things where figuring out how do you build in this feedback loop to kind of get that information along the way, so that you can keep testing that plan and treating that plan as a hypothesis to potentially avoid this mistake. So you go in with some assumptions that people want faster computers, they want this, they want that, and then you find out later that doesn't matter. What they want is uptime. Giving your salespeople or people in your organization the tools and the training to go ask these questions or be aware of this stuff, because we need information to revise it, because this plan's only a hypothesis and we have to keep testing it and keep improving it.
So I have a rule around that. If your math is not working, it probably doesn't add up. So there's a reason you're getting the result you're getting, and if it's not logical in your mind, then there's something you need to explore about the psychology of why somebody's deciding to do something that seems irrational. And I've seen situations where company had far superior products that have been developed, and yet they're not getting traction in a market. And it's illogical why they weren't getting traction, because there was health benefits when we went out and did some research on to what was happening in the buyer psychology, the nurses that made the decisions for the less optimal product, it was all because of time. And so bringing a new product in, learning how that worked was a big barrier. They decided to stay with that older technology simply because it saved time. But when they realized, when the sales team started asking questions around how important is it to get better results for your patients, which may cut down on the time they have to spend post leaving the hospital, that opened up a market. So a different way of looking at, the outcomes.
But I think a part that a lot of businesses undervalue or don't spend time on is how important those initial onboarding and activation stages are. Because I think that's a question that comes up a lot, or a doubt or a concern for a lot of customers is, what's this transition going to be like? Is it going to take me time to get used to this new system, to roll out this new system? Is the value really that much better that I have to stop what we're doing to do this new thing?
I think that understanding the entire process of adding value is incredibly important to every business owner, large or small. I think a lot of assumptions are made based on advantages that are perceived in technology. Again, going back to the pitfall of your own math not working, but you can't figure out why. Well, there's always a reason. We all need to be challenged in our own thinking. And that's what peer group or peer organization can do for an individual. Your own math has to be challenged to get really good. Our ability to imagine is also based on our ability to understand what is really true and what is not true. But if we have a belief system that's based on things that aren't rooted in reality, every decision, every insight will be based on faulty information. And we know that if you have faulty information, the chances of having a good outcome are low.
Then your equation will really not add up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that aspect of what we do. We can imagine something that's not there, and it triggers us to do something to try to take advantage of that or to do it. But that also can lead to a pitfall, and that is that we empower our own mindset too much. And that's where a lot of failure can also come from. We have this need to justify our own reasoning for doing something. And that comes out in how a lot of business owners market their business. So they love to go in and explain their features and benefits for the services they provide. And a lot of times that doesn't create the kind of outcome that they'd like to see. But we're all individuals and we all see things a little differently. And at the end of the day, people only change when it's in their best benefit.
What have been your biggest pitfalls, and how do you approach them today?
I think over time, I've proven that stubbornness doesn't really work very well for the long term. When you think you actually understand something is when you ought to start questioning it. When I become so sure that I've got the information I need to move forward, that I usually get into the most problem. It's when I continue to explore what is behind what's happening, or what do I want to create, or what do I want to harness here. It's when I'm continually asking the questions I get the best answers.
Yeah, I think in most cases that's those are famous last words for some of the biggest failures. Is I could have sworn, or I really thought it was this way.
Yeah, I know what that feels like. So yeah.